So we're going to be watching this, I guess, Mehdi Hassan talking about immigration, populism, and the far right. So let's get into it.
I won't shy away from calling it what it is. Far-right thuggery.
In the aftermath of riots in the UK, fueled by misinformation about migrants and Muslims, the debate about racism and integration has once again taken center stage. My guest tonight suggests the riots were the result of legitimate anger over too many migrants. His critics say that the author and academic who built his career on explaining the rise of the radical right has now been radicalized by it himself. I'm Mehdi Hassan, and I'll be going head-to-head with the provocative British political commentator Matthew Goodwin. I'll challenge him on his views on immigration and why he thinks that a new woke elite is silencing free speech. I'll also be joined by a panel of experts. Zoe Gardner, immigration policy expert and campaigner for migrant rights. Taj Ali, journalist and historian of British South Asian political activism. And David Goodhart, immigration expert and author. Matthew Goodwin, thank you for joining me on Head to Head tonight. You and I have known each other kind of indirectly online through conversations about over a decade now. But your views are very different, I would argue, to what they were when I knew you back in the UK here in 2011, 2012, 2013, when many would say you were a champion of diversity, multiculturalism, immigrants, Muslims. You were calling out the far right. Your critics now say, Matt, that you have become, quote, a part of the right populist movement you once sought to explain, that you've gone native with them, that, quote, instead of writing about the radical right, you've become part of it. So let me start tonight by asking, what happened to you?
Well, as somebody once said,
what do people, at least in America, they consider far right, like, basically Trump. Even though Trump's policies aren't far right. Like, far right would be, like, authoritarian, like, regime, and, like, that's far right. Like, women wouldn't have rights. Shoot. Women wouldn't have rights. A lot of men wouldn't have rights. It'd be a lot more racist around here too. So like, yeah, like far right is different. Like Trump isn't far right. Like in my opinion, he's more so like his policies are more like center right. But I think Trump himself is more center. But like far right, like there's really no far right like political parties, really. Like there is no really far right parties. At least democratically, there are no far right parties. Really, only like mostly socialists, then center left, center, and center right. Like there's really nobody that's really like, at least in political power or no government, people really like far right. Like there's nobody like that in any democratically elected government.
facts change, I change my opinion. And over the last 15 years, I've become convinced that mass immigration is a failure, one of the biggest disasters in recent public policy. I think the elites in Western countries have fundamentally lost touch with the voters in those countries. And I think that unless we change course quickly, we're going to have some really big problems.
A lot of people sympathize with that view, of course. Although over the summer, we saw a very extreme, violent opposition to immigration. The UK saw horrific race riots, sparked by the murder of 3 young girls in the town of Southport. We saw mosques and asylum hotels attacked, police officers attacked, over 1,000 people arrested. In a post for your Substack, you called the people at those riots, quote, ordinary people who feel like they're losing their country and trying to, quote, exercise their voice. It sounded to a lot of your critics that you were justifying those riots, these horrific racist riots. We just had an election in this country in July. That's how you exercise your voice in a democracy, not via rioting when you don't get your way at the ballot box.
No, that is a way of exercising. Well, you have the right to riot. You just don't have a right to necessarily do an insurrection. Like you don't have a right to you have a right to do whatever you want, but under the law, you do have a right to riot, because if you're not getting what you want, then how are you going to get something done? Like, this happens throughout all the political parties. Like, the people want something, right? But then they elect the person who says they're going to do it, but then they never do it. So then how is you going to get something done unless you're actually under threat that your country and yourself and your government's going to be overthrown because people are rioting because you're not giving what they want. So rioting is actually one of the most effective ways of people getting what they want. It really is. Like, electing people doesn't really do anything because they can always change because there's people in their ear. Because, like, once they're already in power, they don't need to listen to you. So, like, they don't care because now who's in their ear? Political people, rich people, globalist people, like the global elite. Other countries are in their ear, like, yeah, don't do that, do this. Like, they don't really care about what the people want because they already got the power. So the only way to really get what you want as the majority is through rioting. So,
well, protest has always been part of our political DNA, and obviously everybody would disassociate themselves from the criminality and the violence in the summer. I certainly wrote about it, I condemned it. But as Mark Easton and other liberal commentators at the time noted, there were also ordinary people protesting about what has been happening to their country. And that isn't just about mass migration, it's also about the breakdown of borders, it's about feeling unsafe in their own community, in their own country. And for people who engage in violence, they should have been rounded up and sent to prison, as many of them were. But there were lots of peaceful protesters at those events as well. And the polling afterwards, Mehdi, was quite revealing. Over 60% of Brits said, yes, I blame the people who engage in violence, but actually 63% said, I blame recent government immigration policy for these protests. And what I was trying to do in that piece is to say, look, there is clearly a lot more going on here than these idiots and morons who are trying to set fire to a hotel or attack a mosque. What we have in this country is a social fabric that is breaking down, and we need to talk about it.
There was mixed polling. I mean, YouGov also found that the protests, even the protests, were only supported by 1 in 3 Britons, 34%. In fact, only 1 in 6 said that people causing unrest had legitimate concerns. It's interesting that you say you condemn the violence, but in your big Substack post on the riots, you only condemned the violence against the police. You did not condemn the violence against Muslims, Asians, the attack on a mosque in Southport. There was not one word from you about that, and you wrote...
Well, there's really no need, at least in the UK wise. Like, why does he need to defend something that's already like 100% defended? Like, it's already against, like, I think they have like laws in the UK where you can't speak out against anybody really, but especially like the Muslim population. So like, there's no need. Like, why do I need to condemn something where it's already condemned? It's like, I'm trying to think of a good example. Okay, let's just give a stupid example. Basically, like, okay, we already condemn mass shootings, right? But then it's like, I don't know. He condemned people getting ran over by drunk drivers. It's like, well, there was a mass shooting that day also, but you only condemned the person who's drunk driver ran over the person. So why didn't you condemn that? It's a terrible example. I really couldn't think of a good example, but it's basically what I'm trying to say is it's already condemned to the highest level. So like, he doesn't need to like basically rinse and repeat that. Like, we need he's trying to bring up things that actually are affecting people and are actually important to people. This other stuff is not important to people. This is all like political bullshit, really, like with the Muslim and like other bullshit stuff.
2,000-word piece.
Well, I'm sure I did at the time, and I condemn it now. I think nobody in their right mind would say that was somehow excusable. But clearly, what was going on there was a bit like during the BLM protests in 2020. We had a national conversation about the legitimate injustices that underpin those protests. It did result in the injury of 30 police officers and lots of unrest in America, as you know better than me. Cities like Portland were largely devastated by protests and anarchism. But yet we still had this mature conversation about what is going on here.
But just to be clear, the Black Lives Matter protests were not like this. 90% of the protests in the US, according to one academic study, showed they were peaceful. There was no comparison. Even Priti Patel, not known as a kind of liberal, muesli-eating, sandal-wearing leftist, hardcore right-wing Home Secretary under the Conservatives, said there's a clear difference between that and then. She says what we saw during the pandemic protests, the BLM protests, was protest. This is a complete distinction. This is burning down.
What do you say? I mean, during BLM, no, it wasn't a protest. That was bro, they burned down like places, like, bro, like they're burning stuff down. They robbed people, like that was horrible, bro. Like that was No, bro, that wasn't a protest. Protesting is usually peaceful. Rioting is what they did, and they destroyed other people's businesses within that city who can't come back because of the stupid shit that they did. Like, bro.
Down of places of worship, thuggery, violence, razor.
Okay, but the issue is, for lots of people, what these events became was a proxy for this underlying issue that we've never in this country been able to get on top of, which is we promise the British people one thing, which is control and lower migration, and then we do another. Priti Patel's an interesting example. You say she's hard right. I'd say she's the most pro-immigration Home Secretary we've ever had in this country. Now, if you're a Conservative voter in Northern England, you were promised in 2019 lower migration, lower overall numbers, and a high-skill policy. And then the government that you elected gives you the absolute opposite of that, puts everything on steroids and says to hell with you. You're going to be frustrated and you're going to be angry.
I just want to deal with these riots issues because you say you condemn it now.
That's because of globalism. That's why they ignore what you guys want. And because they're bought by other huge businesses or people. Like, that's why.
You didn't condemn it in your post. You even wrote sympathetically, Matt, about a woman who went to prison in the UK because, according to you, quote, she wrote something very offensive on Facebook and you objected to that. Can you tell us what she said?
Yeah, she was a full-time carer for her husband, and she wrote something along the lines of they should blow up this mosque, and I think she said something hideous. People.
Yeah, blow the mosque up with the adults in
sure.
it. You don't think that merits a prison sentence?
If somebody writes something on social media in their own home...
No, that doesn't deserve a prison sentence. It does deserve some scrutiny, maybe be like, okay, maybe a visit from like, are you planning on doing something? Like, would you mind if we search your property just to make sure that you're not actually like planning on doing this? Like, yeah, maybe it deserves that. But if she's not actually like doing it, she doesn't deserve prison. I would say she does deserve some scrutiny, maybe like a police visit just to make sure that she's not actually going to do something. But besides that, no prison. That doesn't make sense.
However offensive I might find it, I don't think they should go to prison. That's my personal
You don't think people
view.
can incite violence on social media? It doesn't matter whether she's in her home. She's inciting violence.
If it's clear incitement, they should be in prison. What I
Blow
saw
the mosque up with adults in it.
She also
Is that clear incitement?
She also very quickly deleted it. She expressed sorrow. I believe in Christian notions of forgiveness. If somebody says, I'm sorry, I say, give you a second chance.
Do you know how many Muslims have gone to prison over the last 20 years for saying much less than that on social media?
I can disagree with that. It's the same principle as non-crime hate incidents. I think what we're living through is an Orwellian imposition from above that I think lots of people in this country, the home of individual liberty, common law, Magna Carta, repel against. I'm one of them. I don't think we should be doing that.
Here's what really bothered a lot of people about your post and actually really undermines, I would argue, one of the key arguments you make in your book. You say we should treat people as individuals. Don't become obsessed with group identities, ethnic identities, racial identities. And yet you wrote about the guy accused of murdering these 3 little girls, that he was the son of immigrants from Rwanda. Why is it relevant that the suspect is the British son of Rwandan immigrants?
He ultimately was a product of migration.
It's important because if he's from there, like he's literally directly from there. Like it's not like his parents were from there and then he grew up there. It is important to know where he came from because that does influence his ideology, because usually people, especially now since countries don't enforce assimilation to countries anymore. So it actually is important to know where he comes from because he is a product of his environment. So it's important to state where he's from because that definitely influences his ideology of why he's doing certain things.
Second generation migrant, we know from a lot of research that cultural practices, traditions, values, different ways of life tend to pass down from first to second, third generation. We know he came from a very conflict-ridden society, Rwanda.
We have no idea what his motivation is. The police don't know. What do you know that they know?
Well, one of those potential motivations, let's see what happens.
But why didn't you wait to see what happens before you made a kind of slur against Rwandan immigrants?
Because the fact is, this ultimately was a symbol. I think.
How is it a symbol? It's got nothing to do with his parents, unless you have some evidence that the police don't have.
As I said in the original piece, for many Brits, what happened in the 12 days of that hot summer, we saw young British Muslim lads assaulting police officers in Manchester Airport. We saw young second-generation lad stabbing a British Army officer almost
What's that got to do with your description
because
of the...
just hear me out. In the course of a week, we saw the Southend machete gangs, mass violence. We had the riots in Leeds. We had evidence of communalism in other parts of the country. We had sectarianism at the general election just a month before.
In your opinion?
With
These are not facts. This is your opinion.
Well, for lots of Brits, when you put that together and you look at the course of those things, I think what 2024 will come back to be seen as was really a watershed moment in our debate over...
I understand, but you're avoiding the question, Matt.
No, I'm
We've
not,
got
no, I'm
limit-
not.
You are.
I'm coming to the central point, which
Please,
is...
deal with the child of Rwandan immigrants. I want to nail this down.
Is Britain an integrated
Yes.
society, and do the people who are coming
What
into
evidence
Britain...
do you have? You seem to be implying all sorts of things
Well,
about
I think
someone
it's-
we know nothing about.
Well, I think going out and doing a mass stabbing and going on a murder
A mass stabbing
rampage-
is very British. Sorry to break it to you. A lot of British people do stabbings and killings. This kid was a Brit. Is a Brit. Or is he not a Brit to you?
It depends how you define national identity.
Wow. So am I not a Brit?
No, I think it's, do you respect the country that you live in, and do you follow the rule of law?
So it's a conditional citizenship.
It's not conditional.
You just said
It is a conditional citizenship, really. I mean, for being honest, like, if you become a citizen of a country, you are writing down that you're gonna do everything to make sure your country is your number one priority, not some other country, and also you'll follow the country's laws. So it is conditional. If you're definitely not born in that country, it is conditional. If you're an immigrant, it is conditional.
it depends on whether you respect the country you live in. For somebody who doesn't want to judge people on group identities, why are you bringing up the parents of this kid? Do you have any evidence?
We have lots of evidence.
You do?
Social science has lots of evidence that the second, third generation migrants bring over certain cultural habits, traits,
Murder.
practices. No, but for
So then
example,
what's-
second generation British Muslims, for example, will express higher levels of religiosity.
He was a Muslim. That's part of the
No,
problem.
but the underlying point...
No, because you're
being-
dodging the point here. This guy was the son of Rwandan immigrants, and you cannot explain to this audience why you thought it was relevant to bring that
I've
up.
just explained. I
Because
think it's-
Muslims bring communal
No, I've
practices.
said I think it's obviously about immigration. He is a product of immigration.
That had nothing to do with this, as far
How
as we
do we
know.
know?
We don't, but you're the one making the claim,
I'm
not me.
saying in the context of that week, there were lots of questions to ask about to what extent was this
So don't
guy
ask the
integrated
questions,
into
don't
wider
make
society.
sweeping statements. Here's the problem, Matt. Your critics would say that you used to be an academic, you sat on the Conservative Coalition government's anti-Muslim hatred working group, you used to gather data, you used to analyse it in a sober way. Now they say you just go on the right-wing TV channel GB News, you write columns on the Daily Mail.
Oh, there's lots of left people on GB News
You
as well.
spout off, though, you cut corners. This is what they say, you push unfounded claims. You said on GB News, for example, falsely, and I quote, more than 50% of social housing in London is now occupied by people who are not British. This is not acceptable. Well, forget not being acceptable. It's not true.
I think it's about that. I think it's
not.
about 47, 48.
It's not actually. The percentage of people who are not British in London social housing is about 14%. 85% of people are British citizens.
No, so my view would be, in terms of housing, we're in the middle of a housing crisis. I think we should have a principle of national preference in our housing market.
We do. 85% of people in London are British who are in social housing.
No,
You
I didn't
falsely
quote
said that
you.
more than 50% are not British. That's false.
No, across the country, more generally.
Across the country, it's 90% according to the Ministry of Housing.
when we were allocating social housing, we also used to take into account things like commitment to the community, looking after property, etc.
Yeah.
We don't really do that anymore.
That's a fair point.
We also
That's not
don't-
what you said,
We
though.
also
I just want to go with what you said, Matt, with respect. More than 50% of social housing in London is now occupied by people who are not British. That is not true.
I'd need to look at the statistics.
We have the statistics. According to London government,
I also wrote...
the figure in London is 84%. According to the 2021 census data, only 14% of Londoners living in social housing did not hold a UK passport.
Well, we already. I mean, 50% is kind of a lot, but are we actually really believing like what the government says? Like, bro, their government doesn't even support them. Like, people voted for not immigration, and then they're giving them more immigration. Like, do you really think the government wouldn't lie? Like, say, like, put the number a little bit lower? Like, whatever, bro. Like.
This has been pointed out to you
But
for last year.
no, it
In
hasn't
fact,
been
you
put-
went back on GB News and corrected it and said 48% go to people who are headed by people who are not born in Britain, which is a different point. But you would accept the vast majority of people in social housing are British.
I'd need to look at the data.
I've got the data.
No,
It's right here.
but the fact that
It's right
48,
here.
I think
You can
the
read it.
48,
Copied and pasted.
I think the fact that 48% of social housing in this country has gone to families that are headed by somebody who was not born in the country is a problem.
So that's a different argument, with respect.
Well,
and
I'd
let's
like
talk
to
about
have
that
that.
argument.
Well, let's have that.
No, let's have that argument. You were wrong on the first point.
I don't think I was wrong on the first
You're
point.
100% wrong.
Well, I'd like
It's-
to look at the data.
The Mayor of London, the census data.
I don't think the Mayor of London would be a credible source on that.
Okay, so
Facts.
the London government.
It's
The
a
London government don't know who
it's
the...
it's
All right, how about...
it's a highly political
All right, how about the Ministry of Housing? 90% of social homes go to UK nationals. You're making some sweeping claims and they're wrong. You also said on right-wing channel GB News that I bet nobody knew this, but it's not a criminal offence to hire illegal immigrants in this country. That's not true either. You can be sent to jail for 5 years according to the British government?
No, I don't think that's right. You can hire, under certain conditions, people that haven't got full-time.
If you didn't know, we checked with the Department of Justice. You can be sent to jail for 5 years if you're found guilty of employing someone who knew or had reasonable cause to believe did not have the right to work in the UK. What you said on TV News was just false.
Why, for example, have the French spent much of the last year saying that we are a soft touch when it comes to illegal migration?
Maybe the French, like you, didn't check the facts.
No, well, maybe who do I trust? The French Interior Minister.
You trust the French Interior Minister over our own Ministry of Justice?
No, what I'm saying
That's
is
absurd.
it's very easy in the UK to game the system, a lot easier than it is in other European
Matt, I agree with
countries.
you, but that's a different point.
No, it
You
isn't
can
a different point.
It
because
is, Matt. This is my whole point.
All of this
you could make legitimate arguments, but you don't. You say things that are flat
Mehdi,
false.
all of this is coming back to the central point, which runs through the riots, immigration, the rise of populism, and so on, which is, firstly, do people feel safe in their own country? And secondly, do they
They should feel safe. Crime is at record lows.
Do they feel that this country treats everybody fairly? There is a widespread perception out there that this country does not treat people fairly. It treats newcomers more.
Maybe there's a widespread perception because they see people on TV who are professors giving false statistics about immigrants.
I don't think that's true. The ODI last week, as you know, the Office of Budget Responsibility, showed quite conclusively that low-wage, low-skill, non-selective migration of the sort that we're now bringing into this country, largely because of decisions taken under the previous Conservative governments, is costing for each low-skill, low-wage migrant £150,000 if they live to the age of 60, $500,000 if they live to the age of 80. Mass migration is not only taking more out of the economy than it's putting in.
You just jumped from low-skilled to mass migration. This, again, your critics...
No.
Did you read the report? Because you should be fair to this audience and say the same report said an average migrant worker pays more in tax than they receive in public services throughout their lives. You don't mention that.
Of all the visas, of all the visas we gave out over the last 2 years, what percentage do you think went to high-skilled workers?
I don't know. You can tell me. I don't have to hand.
Do you not have the facts?
I mean, you're going to tell me, but then you were wrong about social housing, so I don't know if it's going to be correct.
13%.
Okay. But the British public want low-skilled workers, you know that, right?
No, they don't.
Yeah, they do. Ipsos Mori polling from earlier this year.
Well, you're making stuff up. I worked in this field for 15 years.
I mean, with respect, February 2024, Ipsos Mori polling, 51% of Brits want more doctors, 52% more nurses. I'm getting there. A plurality, 4 in 10, want to see more care home workers, and 39%, another plurality, want to see more fruit.
4 in 10. It's not
a plurality, more than are opposed. You know what a plurality is, right, Matt? You're a professor, right?
So I think Britain is a remarkably fair and tolerant country. Where I think we've gone wrong is we've been saying to people, we're going to give you a small amount of high-skill migration. It will contribute to things like the NHS, maybe parts of social care, although we should be fixing the social care system ourselves. What we've instead done is we've liberalised the whole system, and we've now brought in lots of low-skill, low-wage migration, which is now taking more out of the economy. So everybody else has to pay more in tax than they would otherwise have to do. I think that's wrong. I think we need to be able to talk about it.
I agree, and I think economists do disagree on that.
No, they don't disagree.
They do, actually. Let's go to our panel. Zoe Gardner is an immigration policy expert, campaigner for migrant rights. Zoe, what's your reaction to what you're hearing from Matt?
One of the things that you do is you muddy the waters about what we're talking about. So the last couple of years, yes, we've had historically very high rate of net immigration overall. All the evidence shows that's dropping off a cliff again now. However, you then go straight from that and talk all about small boats and you call it an invasion. And the threat behind that inflammatory language is always about these big, big numbers. But last year, asylum seekers making the crossing across the channel on small boats made up 5.5% of immigration. I feel like maybe you're misrepresenting and distorting this issue. But in fact, the vast majority of the immigration to this country in the last few years that was high was driven by Ukrainians, Hong Kongers, students, and care workers. And we have had polling that looks at people's reaction to the plummeting numbers of health and social care workers that are coming to the country. And 67% of the country say that's bad news.
David Goodhart is here. David is head of the Demography, Immigration, Integration Unit at the think tank Policy Exchange. You're someone who's been critical of mass immigration also in recent years, including on this show previously. Were you worried to see the opposition to mass migration turn into what we saw it turn into in August? Did that shock you, stun you, concern you?
Yeah, of course it did. But I also think, as Matt has said, there are lots of different things motivating the people that took part. Quite a lot of the protesting was perfectly peaceful. It was ordinary families. There was a racist fringe involved. but we're talking about poor white people who are really pissed off and have lots of different reasons for being pissed off. Immigration becomes a sort of symbolic motivation for some of them, not all of them. And I think we need to sort of look at what is pissing people off. And there, there's deindustrialization, globalization, the erosion of national sovereignty, of which,
Does racism play a part in your analysis?
Yeah, well, I mean, we saw racism, expressed. It doesn't mean to say we become a racist country.
No, I didn't ask that. I just said racism in terms of opposition.
When it's still like 3% of people in Britain think you have to be white to be truly British. Only 5% of people would feel uncomfortable if an immigrant lived next door to them. We remain a very liberal country. 200,000 people said they opened their house to a Ukrainian.
Although, to be fair, 4 million people voted for a guy who said he doesn't want Romanians living next to him. But let me bring in Taj Ali, journalist, historian on South Asian activism in the UK. You reported on the riots yourself, I believe. What do you make of what you've heard just now from David and from Matt about
Well, I completely agree that we need to be tough on the causes of the riots. And the causes of the riots was racism, Islamophobia, and the demonization of ethnic minority communities. And it's been happening for a very long time. It's true that there are many pissed off white people. I live with those pissed off white people in Luton. I also live with poor Black and Asian working class people who are always ignored from our definitions of what constitutes the working class. They also live in areas that have been devastated by deindustrialization, by austerity, and by cuts to public services. They don't go around attacking people who look different to them, or trying to burn down hotels housing refugees, or desecrating graves, or making sure that people like my mum and my sister who wear the hijab feel unsafe. I was hearing stories from people who were attacked on the streets. There was one woman in Belfast who was holding her baby and she was punched in the face. And yes, many of these people do live in very poor parts of the country. And I absolutely believe that we have to tackle the issues surrounding deindustrialization. We need to address material concern. We need to address poverty. And we also need to address radicalization of young white working class boys. And a lot of that radicalization is taking place by people like Tommy Robinson, Nigel Farage, and I'm afraid to say Matthew Goodwin as well.
Do you want to respond?
I think it's very easy just to look at what's going on within white working class communities. I mean, we do forget 1 in 3 black and minority ethnic voters opted for Brexit. But just look at where the riots were. There's a reason the riots were so intense in Rotherham, because in many of those communities, people had watched the systematic sexual exploitation of young white women at the hands of Pakistani Muslim gangs. So what I'd like to do is just push the morons.
So, yeah, these Pakistani Muslim rape gangs, as they call it, that is something the government hid. So, like, when Mehdi, like, brings up statistics like, oh, only, like, 15% of people in London are immigrants are on, like, the social welfare system there, or, like, the low-scale labor people actually pay more into the system than it's actually thought, than they take out. Like, it's kind of hard to believe that, because I don't know. Honestly, I just see his bullshit. Honestly, I see his bullshit. Like, I don't believe like what the government says or the media. Like, I kind of just believe, like, honestly, I just believe common sense. Like, if it makes sense, it makes sense. Like, I can tell if somebody's spouting bullshit. Like, from what I hear from this guy, he's not spouting bullshit. He really isn't. Maybe he just does need to do better with sticking with the topic, but, like, he's honestly not spitting any bullshit. Like, honestly, it's Mehdi who's really spitting out a lot of the bullshit. Like,
to one side, go to prison if they try to attack a mosque or if they set fire to a hotel. I'm not interested in those people. Let's just get serious about the social fabric in this country and start dealing with the underlying issues that we have. Lower migration, fix the borders. You might not like the word invasion, Zoe. The definition of invasion is an unwanted incursion into one's territory. 139,000 people since 2018, many of whom, some of whom are losing their lives.
Zoe's point about the boats, though, that you're cherry-picking the numbers again.
139,000.
No, you're obsessed with boats. I saw a photo of you in a boat.
Yeah.
Right? It's 5.5% of the numbers. Even if we were to stop all the boats tomorrow, you'd still be complaining about the other 94.5%.
What's the number one issue in the country right now?
And why is
it's immigration. Why is it? Because we're having a debate over immigration? No, it's because we have never gone through a demographic shift in this country to this degree.
Much less positive positions towards migration. You know, when people really hated immigrants and there were at scenes of violence like we saw this summer on the streets back in the 80s, back in the 90s, when immigration was at the levels that you claim to want now. The actual truth is hostility to immigration doesn't go up with the rate of immigration. We have the most positive attitudes towards immigration in this country that we've ever had.
I agree.
Isn't it true that actually the people who are concerned about immigration are not concerned because of the numbers, they're concerned because of people like you?
So that we're out of time for this half. I want to give Matt the last word before we go to a break.
Yeah, look, I think we need to understand that 139,000 people entering the country illegally, breaking the law, is a problem. For many people in this country, we have a sense of fairness and fair play. And if you violate that, people get very concerned about it. You want to get rid of populism? Strengthen the borders, get people to come through legal routes. It's not that difficult.
There aren't many legal routes for asylum seekers. We will have to take a break at this point. In part 2...
He said there aren't many legal routes for asylum seekers, but there are routes. Or routes. Like, what are you talking about? It doesn't matter. If there's none, then yeah, it makes sense. But if there's not many, I mean, okay. But there are some. Like, what was the point of that? That was a stupid remark. There are still ways for them to, asylum seekers. It's not like there's none. That was a stupid remark.
Of the show, I'll be talking to Matt Goodwin about his provocative thesis in his book about who really runs Britain, who really is influencing the direction of travel. Stick around for part 2 of Head to Head. Welcome back to Head to Head on Al Jazeera English. My guest today is the author Matthew Goodwin. We've been talking about immigration, populism, the riots here in the UK. We're going to hear in this half from our very patient audience here in London's Conway Hall. But before we get to them, Matt, let's talk about the broader point you make in the book and elsewhere. See, I'm 45 years old. You're 2 years younger than me, I think. In my lifetime, our lifetime, the Conservatives have governed this country for 32 years. That's more than 2/3 of the time that you and I have been alive.
Yeah, they don't really have like a conservative government. It's more like they have like a center, and then it's like, so like based off our system, like they basically have a far left, and center. They don't really have a center. They don't even have a center right really necessarily party. They only have like a center or a moderate. They don't even have like a person that goes right. Honestly, most European countries don't have it. It's actually pretty rare. I think Poland might be like one of the, really it's like the Eastern European countries, really the only countries that still have like a semblance of a right leaning. I mean, Germany's kind of rebuilding that a little bit with their I forgot what the name of their party is. I think it's the AJD party or something. Some type of party Germany's having is going to go more towards the right. But the UK, they don't really have like a right party. It's only center, but they call it conservative, even though it's just the moderate, and then left, and then left is far left.
But according to you, we've been governed by a liberal elite for 50 years. What are you talking about?
Yeah. Well, I don't actually quite say that. What I'm saying...
You literally said that.
You
literally said that. For much of the last 50 years. Your words in your book.
What I'm saying is, there is an old elite that is still very visible. But what I'm arguing is, within the elite in this country and all Western democracies, there is now a battle underway, and the new elite, which is not really defining itself by wealth and money, it is defining itself by its social liberalism, its radical woke progressivism, comes from universities, affluent families, lives in the cities.
But they haven't ruled the country for 50 years, have they?
They wield now, unlike anything we've seen before.
But you didn't say now. You said much of the last 50 years.
The creative industries, the universities, production, television, publishing, they've amassed immense cultural power.
I'm not disputing the cultural power. I'm saying
changing the national conversation.
But not for the last 50 years. That's just wrong. Margaret Thatcher was Prime Minister.
It depends. I mean, Daniel Bell was writing in the 1970s, an academic.
But there was no elite running this country that was a liberal elite in the 80s. It's not true.
What he said is the elite class, this is an important point, unlike the old elite, today's elite derive their status by denigrating their own country, denigrating the West.
True.
They derive their status
Facts.
by saying, actually, I am institutionally
Hold on.
racist. I have my privilege." Whereas
Are you in the new elite? Are you in the new elite?
I would say I'm a renegade member of the university class. That's what I would say.
But you're not in the new elite.
Well, my family are working class.
But are you in the new elite?
I don't really think so.
Because you just said the new elite denigrate this country. I saw a tweet from you where you said London's a hole.
Well,
It sounds like you're the one denigrating the country, not the.
That's a bad example.
I hate to break the news, but London is not the country.
London is the capital city of this country.
I've been coming in and out of London for 40 years.
Fair
You
enough.
and I both know London is not what it used to be.
In what world? I think it's better. In what world is Carol Vorderman, the TV
Why is he lying?
presenter who did sums on Countdown, or Gary Lineker, a footballer who not only didn't go to Oxbridge, which is part of your definition, he didn't go to any university. How are they the new elite, the ruling class, while Rishi Sunak, Boris Johnson, multimillionaires who were literally prime minister, they're not the elite, but Lineker and Vorderman are? This sounds ridiculous
Of course
as
they
a
are.
definition.
Of course they are.
Just people you disagree with.
As you know, there is competition within the elite. There are different groups of elites.
How is
Now,
Lineker in the elite? He
there are
didn't go
lots-
to university.
Gary Lineker has immense cultural
But he didn't
power.
go to university. Your
If you-
definition is Oxbridge or Russell
Sure, I
I've
mean,
read
there-
your definition.
As you know, in all things there are outliers. But there are
Okay.
conservatives as
Convenient.
well as Labour people. You can point to conservatives, I'm sure. Let's think about somebody who is actually away from the vibes-based policy. I actually thought Boris Johnson was kind of like a bohemian liberal, really.
I just find
he
this
wasn't a
definition of an
conservative.
elite that just pulls in TV presenters but excludes bankers and prime ministers
Well, it's
to be a
what-
very odd
it's
definition.
what
in
Richard,
fact, you said that I'm in the new elite.
Yeah.
I read your Sun piece.
Yeah.
You said I'm in the new elite, which is hilarious because out of the two of us, you're the guy who has sat on government commissions. You're the guy who dances with politicians at parties. You say on your website that you've privately briefed prime ministers and presidents. You've been invited to speak at the US State Department, the European Commission, Google, Deutsche Bank, UBS, JP Morgan, Rothschild, Trilateral Commission, and Goldman Sachs. I haven't been invited to speak at any of those places. So how am I the elite and you're not?
Well, firstly, as you know, we don't share the same sets of values, and I would argue your values reflect this new elite.
So now you're defining elites based on just people you disagree with, which
No,
is what
I
I said
think-
2 minutes ago.
I think
it's
you-
not based on any kind of actual life
Really,
experience.
I think you derive a sense of moral righteousness, a sense of grandiosity.
As do you.
by
As do you. Both of us do as opinion
by
formers.
projecting a set of socially liberal, radically progressive values. You're quite sceptical of, let's say, Western nations' history and so forth. And I think in the axis of elite competition, your group are winning at the moment. I think they are accumulating lots of cultural power. I think
Really?
they're
But how
shaping
come
the
you're the one who's
national
speaking at
conversation.
Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, UBS,
but
Rothschild,
this
Deutsche
is-
Bank? That's not
this is
elite.
a- it's a
Those are not the
slightly-
elite. I love the way you just airbrush the financial elites to people with all the money
But
from
this-
any discussion.
No,
very convenient.
I'm very critical of some of those people.
Then why are you speaking
But
at all the
Benny,
banks?
if you want to understand why so many people in the West are turning to Trump, are turning to Le Pen, are turning to the AFD, are turning to Nigel Farage, I'll give you one reason. It's because what's happened is much of the elite class has moved so far to the cultural left on gender issues.
Yeah.
Little boys can become girls and little girls can become boys, on hating Western countries and their history, on saying that we should be ashamed of who we are. Most voters do not think like that. So what I'm arguing is if the elite
You
class
mentioned-
wants to stop this populist rebellion,
Yeah.
they need to get back in
And I'm
touch
saying to you that your
with
elite
the
class
values
definition
of
is
ordinary
nonsensical.
people.
You are a Reform Party supporter. You mentioned Farage, just to be clear. This is the most elite party in the UK,
Well, I'm not
cosplaying.
actually a member of the Reform
You literally
Party.
told people to vote for Reform.
I think Reform is a vessel, it's a
But
vehicle.
you told people to
if you
vote for
want to
Reform,
change
Matt. There's no point
politics in
backing
this
away from what
country.
you did. You told people to vote for Reform. It's the most elite party in the UK. It has 5 MPs. 4 of the 5 Reform Party MPs are Richard Tice, private schoolboy, multimillionaire CEO. Nigel Farage, private schoolboy, city trader. Rupert Lowe, private schoolboy, investment banker. James McMurdoch, investment banker. I found your elite, Matt. They're called the Reform Party.
It's all
Well, honestly, I guess these businessmen need to come save it because there's a lack of common sense. So, these people have to rise up as the right wing because when necessarily you're right, you have common sense and you know that you have to work off meritocracy. That's what the right believes in, meritocracy. And you have to earn what you get. You have to earn everything that you get. For the left, they just think you should be able to just get it and then whatever. It's free. Free money, free love, whatever, however you want to say it. That's why all the people that are rising up on the right are necessarily rich businessmen because they had to build the business, and a country is a business because if it fails, everybody can necessarily die or is out of a job. Same with the business. If a business goes out of business, people lose their jobs. You lose your business and you lose money, and people die. The country is a business. You can't run it I don't know, like, it's not a game. Like, I don't even know how to explain it. Like, you have to run a country like a business, and you have to run it like how basically how the right wing thinks. Like, as a conservative, you have to run it like that. You have to run it off meritocracy, not feelings.
So,
I mean, they are.
very good. It's also got,
They are, aren't they?
the Reform Party's also got a more working class electorate than the Labour Party.
What about the people in Parliament?
Of course they're elite. Of course
Okay,
they're
good.
elites in the party.
Finally, we can agree.
But it's not,
All right.
as you know, politics in this country is broken. Both of the big
Oh, yes,
parties
it's
are not
broken
speaking to
because
the
of-
values of ordinary people.
Your definition of ordinary people is different to mine. Let's go to the panel who are waiting patiently. Zoe Gardner is an immigration policy expert, campaigner for migrant rights. Zoe, do you recognize this idea of a new elite shaping the national conversation? What do you think?
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head, didn't you? Because he's excluding everybody with real financial and political power from his definition of the new elite. The reality is that almost in the entirety of our media ecosystem in the UK is owned by literally a small handful of billionaire men, right? One example would be Paul Marshall. He's the majority share owner of GB News, your spiritual home. He just bought The Spectator magazine, but all of us ordinary people have felt the pinch, have felt that we're getting poorer. He's now a billionaire, and he has been shown to share really radical extremist and nasty racist content online. He is the type of person who has the real power to set the agenda of the narrative in the UK. What you're talking about, the idea that the left sets the narrative on migration in the UK, it's just not realistic for anybody who's opened a newspaper in the last 40 years.
I'm going to bring in both other panelists and get you to respond to all three. David Goodhart is the founder, former member of Prospect, former editor of Prospect magazine. He's now at the Policy Exchange think tank. David, you've written about elites as well in the past, if I remember correctly. I know you live in London. You went to Eton. You studied at what is now a Russell Group University. You've had an influential role in the media. Do you think you're a member of the new elite or the old elite?
Well, kind of like you two. I'm a kind of mixture of the two. I mean, you're private school and Oxford,
I am.
if I'm right. Matt is a more kind of meritocratic figure than you in many ways. I mean, I wrote a book a few years ago called The Road to Somewhere, in which I talked about the people that see the world from anywhere and the people that see the world from somewhere. And I think that is quite an important, quite useful sort of social psychological way of looking at populism.
But you didn't answer my question.
The anywheres are a minority, overwhelmingly highly educated, mobile, believe in openness and autonomy. Somewheres tend to be much more rooted. Their identities are much more connected to place and group, so they're much more discomforted by radical change. And both of the worldviews, the more liberal worldview of the anywheres is perfectly decent and legitimate, as is the worldview of the somewheres. The problem is the anywheres have been over-dominant in our society for the last 30 years.
Taj, you were with Tribune magazine. You're on the left of politics. Matt thinks the left is cultural left, dominant, powerful. Do you, A, agree with that? And B, what do you make of the argument that Zoe mentioned as well about it's the billionaires who are getting away with not being scrutinized while we focus on Gary Lineker and
When we
Harold
talk
Walton?
about elites, we're talking about class here. We're talking about people struggling to put a roof over their heads, money in their pockets, food on the table. That's what annoys people about the elites, that there is one way of living for them and one way of living for the over 160 billionaires in this country that have a lot of money. If you want to tackle elites, why are we not talking about taxing the rich? Why are we not talking about redistribution? Why are we not talking about investing in many of those communities
We
that
are
saw
talking about
rioting?
taxing
No,
the
we're
rich.
talking
We're
about
talking
culture
about mass
wars
tonight.
because we
These
don't want to
questions to
talk
Matt.
about class. We would rather talk about culture wars. We'd rather try and play this game of division and the blame game, rather than dealing with the central issue that for many, many years, we have seen a lack of investment in working class communities.
So let me-
The wealthiest in society are getting away with a lot, and we're not holding them to account. I want to tackle the elite as much as everyone else, but that's not what we are talking about.
Why is Labour?
So Zoe and Taj are both suggesting that you are focused on culture wars, not redistribution of wealth, and it's partly to protect people like Sir Paul Marshall, who own GB News, that you appear on. You don't.
Redistribution of wealth is a handout. You don't deserve a handout because you didn't earn it. So why do people think they deserve something that they never earned? Like, why does somebody need to pay higher taxes for a business that they built? Like, or pay higher taxes and give you money for a business they built that you didn't help build? Like, it doesn't make sense. Like, people who think they're entitled just because you have money, you should give me money because I don't want to work as hard. Like, me, that's why I'm trying to become more of a commentator on YouTube and Rumble. Like, I don't want to be poor, and I'm tired of being poor. So like I'm doing this, and I'm gonna keep doing it until I succeed because I want to make something of myself. Like I want to be known. I want to have some money. I want to be able to support a family, have a big family. I want to be able to do whatever I want. Like I necessarily don't want to be like popular and known where like people are stopping you on the streets and like asking me for a picture. I don't like. I know it's kind of stupid to say that when I'm on YouTube right now. I'm like doing it all right now, trying to grab attention because I need attention to be successful. But I necessarily don't like attention. Have a lot of attention on myself. It makes me very uncomfortable. Don't really like it. But you have to earn it. You have to earn everything. You have to earn everything. You can't be lazy, bro. Like you have to earn it.
Don't talk about him as an elite member.
Yeah. Well, firstly, I disagree with the characterization of Paul Marshall, who I do know, and he doesn't.
Is he not a billionaire?
He doesn't share those views that you.
He did on social media, Matt. You know this. He's shared Islamophobic tweets on social media.
I think David hit the nail on the head when he said the problem we have today is that the elite that I'm talking about represent about 20% of the country. If you look at the British Social Attitude Survey, people tend to forget this in London. Only 20% of Brits are strongly and consistently liberal on lots of issues. Yet if you were to look at the national conversation or the policies of the past...
Come on, Matt, you're cherry-picking again. The vast majority of the public agree with what Taj just said. They support redistribution,
I'm going to come to that.
Public ownership.
I'm going to come to that. Those overwhelmingly reflect the liberal priorities of this new ruling class. The issue, and I agree with everything Taj said actually, if you read this book, I'm very critical of things like Thatcher's economic legacy, for example, but there's a difference. The new elite are also advocating beliefs because of their class. Instead of deriving status from money and wealth, they now derive their status from these luxury beliefs like, let's preach radical gender ideology to children. Let's defund or scale back the police, or let's have loose, open borders.
Let's go to our audience who've been waiting patiently here in London's Conway Hall. Raise your hands if you'd like to come in and ask a question. We're going to go to the lady here in the front row in the dress.
I just want to ask, why do you keep using words such as invasion when you refer to migrants? When you're fully aware about the incendiary impact that it has.
Yeah. I think, as I said, I think a definition is an unwanted incursion into somebody's territory, and I think that's what's happening.
People asking for asylum are invading Britain?
I think they're breaking the law. I think they're
Matt Goodwin of 10, 12 years ago, who I knew, he would have been disgusted with this language.
As you know, under Tony Blair and New Labour, there was a very realistic, pretty tough position on illegal migration and a broken asylum system. I have moved slightly over the last 15 years, but nowhere near as much as the ruling class in this country.
But you're using the language of the far right, Matt. That's what I'm asking you about.
I don't personally think I'm using the language of the far right. I made reference to a film that I made called How to Stop the Invasion. And the reason I did that is because I wanted to say to the British people, okay, if you actually want to solve this, there are 3 things you need to do to solve it. You need to leave the ECHR, you need to reform the Human Rights Act, and we need an active deterrent. Because I don't want...
Again, to go back to our discussion, you can say those 3 things, totally legitimate to want to leave the ECHR. That's a legitimate political debate. But using language that Holocaust survivors have said reminds them of the Nazi Holocaust, using the language that the shooter in the Pittsburgh Tree of Life synagogue used, invasion of migrants. That is disgusting.
That's a very cheap political position.
It's the language of the far right, man.
Yeah, I don't think...
You don't feel bad?
I don't play the guilt by association game. I want to fix the crisis. I want to fix
you're the one associating yourself with the far right by using their language.
No, I don't. As I've said, it's an unwanted incursion into territory.
You can make that point without using the language that Holocaust survivors are saying, please don't use. All right, let's go back to the audience. Gentleman here in the front.
Bro, that was fucking retarded, bro. Like, oh my god, bro. That's why, I don't like the left. They always make arguments based off feelings. Like, bro, go based on facts, bro. Like, what the hell, bro? Like, you guys argue, his arguments are basically like what a woman would say, basically. Like, bro, just shut up and, just shut up, bro.
The government's very concerned about misinformation. Shouldn't citizens be much more concerned about either a lack of information or a deliberate suppression of information? I'm thinking particularly of government agencies. This is very worrying in an open, free society.
Briefly, do you agree with that?
So during the riots, what we saw was an attempt by many to say this is about misinformation. And there was a lot of information online. But in the immigration debate, what really irritates me is people say, well, voters are misinformed. Here's what's happening right now. The Department for Work and Pensions, they're not making any data available on welfare claimants by nationality or immigration status. You don't get detailed information on things like welfare credits and tax credits. So I'm having a debate with Mehdi, and he's saying immigration is good for the country. I'm saying, how about this? If you're so confident in this experiment and you care so much about information and transparency, why don't we get all the data out there and let's look at what effect immigration is having? Because across Europe, the data is clear. It's a net fiscal cost.
I mean, Europe's having an aging crisis. Let's see how they do without immigrants. Okay, let's go back to the audience. Yes, sir.
You say that you want to look at the underlying causes of the problems. How do you justify stopping at the immigrant always and never actually looking at the underlying causes of an economic system that harms white British people, sons of immigrants, daughters of immigrants, harms everyone, but yet you only stop at the immigrant as the cause of everything?
So in this book, I make the specific point that mass migration is being used by big business, global corporations, to keep their costs low, to keep their profits high, and to keep this broken economic model that you're all living in here in this country, which is a consumption-driven model. GDP is flat, GDP per capita is going down, mass immigration isn't giving us what we were promised, the economy is not dynamic, it's not productive. So I talk about those economic issues all the time. I agree with you.
All right, it's interesting though, because he asked about the economic system, you went immediately back to immigration. You couldn't, like, what about actual bosses exploiting workers, not paying enough tax, tax evasion? You don't mention any of that.
No, but this is one of the biggest things we have to solve as a country.
He did say that. He brought up the immigrants. That's how they're exploiting people.
Why do you think that we shouldn't actually be celebrating how the UK has been integrating minorities? Segregation's gone down, education attainment's actually getting better and better and better from migrant communities. Actually, the UK has done a really good job when it comes to integrating migrants.
But isn't the quality of education going down also because of this? Because a lot of people aren't able to attain the degree because the ability to get one is actually requires you to have a higher IQ, but a lot of these immigrants don't have the highest IQ, so it's very hard for them to attain actually good degrees, so they lower the standards.
Compared to Europe and elsewhere, shouldn't we be celebrating our country rather than denigrating it?
On the education system, I completely agree with you. It's one of the examples why Britain is not an institutionally racist society. Children from minority backgrounds are outperforming their white counterparts at every level of the education system. That's remarkable. I see that all the time in the university. But I don't think you can look at Britain in 2024, after everything we've seen this year, and say this is an integrated country where immigration and multiculturalism are working. I would like us to try and be a bit realistic. When we look at communalism, when we look at the riots, when we look at a lot of the evidence, I would dispute your claim that segregation is going down. I think there's a lot of research to suggest it's going up. I was struck by Ed who said...
Yeah, it is. Like, there's a lot more people, obviously, because people aren't assimilating because they're requirement to assimilate. So people necessarily group together in a certain city or village, and then they segregate themselves off from the other societies, and that's how they're able to make these little societies of like little Sharia courts and built temples and stuff, because it's only them in that section, and they don't know. Well, it's not even really, they don't allow it. They just, other people or other races don't want to stay there just because of the culture within that little city or village or however big it is. So yeah, I do agree with that. Segregation actually is going up.
Payne's book Among the Mosques, where he made a very important point. He said if you're a young British Muslim in parts of this country, and you turned up unannounced at mosques across the country, he said you can go your whole day without ever really interacting with the white British majority. I don't think that should happen in this country.
Okay. All right, let's go back to the audience. Lady fourth row back here.
You talk about a policy of mass immigration, but you seem to conflate all forms of immigration together, often focusing around the small boats rather than all the different forms of immigration. We have an aging population, we have a decreasing work age population that we need to support. Work visas, 60% of those are going to the health sector, which I think most people recognise as no need. So what would your response to that be?
Yeah, I mean, on the economics of mass migration, I think that the case is falling apart very rapidly. If you look at the evidence from Denmark, the Netherlands, Sweden, Finland, now the UK, we have not had controlled migration. It's gone the opposite. Net migration was 250,000 in 2010. It's now about 700,000. We've had the most pro-immigration governments.
Again, cherry picking, the 700,000 was to do with specific factors, not every year.
Yeah,
in fact, the ONS is predicting it's going to go down in coming years.
No, both the OBI and the ONS assume now ongoing we're going to have net migration of between 300,000 and 400,000.
But not 700,000.
As you know, but historically, those are still very large numbers. I'll give you just one stat.
She was asking about specific types.
Yeah, no, I'm saying what we mainly now have, largely thanks to Boris Johnson and the Conservative government, is very costly forms of low-wage, low-skill migration. And by the way, on the ageing point, this is an important point. On ageing societies, let me ask you one question.
Briefly, and then we're going to move
Why has Canada, liberal, super woke Canada, changed its mind on mass immigration? Why has it done that? Because it's realised what everybody else is realising. We're creating a population trap. Our populations are growing so quickly, they're exceeding the capacity of the state to provide basic public services.
Hold on, I've got to go back to the audience, David. Lady there, yes.
Matt, aren't you targeting certain religions and certain races when you talk about your opposition to mass migration and immigration?
Who would you think that I'm targeting?
No, you tell me who you're targeting.
I'm very supportive of Hong Kong migration. I'm supportive of Ukrainian migration. I'm supportive of high school.
You're not supportive of Afghan asylum seekers coming from Afghanistan, a country we wrecked?
I don't particularly. My issue, what I'm trying to say is, I think if we had net migration at around 100,000. And it was high skilled. I don't really care where it comes from. It's high skilled.
But the British public don't want just high skilled immigration.
They do.
No, that's not true. I gave you the Ipsos numbers. People want more fruit pickers. I gave you the Ipsos numbers. They want more fruit pickers and they want more care workers.
So like, it's kind of also racist. I guess he doesn't necessarily realize it. Maybe he does. What Mehdi's saying is basically like, so are you saying that like they want more fruit pickers? So they basically, are you saying that only immigrants are able to do that low skill labor, not the British people? So like, aren't you necessarily like kind of being racist there, that they're only low skilled people or only immigrants can do that job? It's kind of racist what he's saying, you know, like kind of interesting. Guess he doesn't realize it.
Migration is always the most unpopular form of migration.
In abstract. Well, the beauty of the polling you do, Matt, is you say, do you not like immigration? Everyone says no. And then you go through the categories, everyone says, no, actually, I want all those people. That's the irony.
Health migration might be popular, but it is an absolute scandal. 35% of NHS doctors were trained abroad, many of them in poor countries that desperately need those people. Most other European countries train their own doctors and nurses. We do not. We suck them out of poor countries. It's an absolute scandal.
David, I agree with you. We should train more. Yeah. We should raise more taxes off the rich folks to pay for it.
Absolutely.
All right, let's go to the gentleman in the beard there who's been
public school boys like you.
Yeah, happy to pay more tax.
Thank you, Mehdi. Just 2 points. It's not illegal to claim asylum under international law. And secondly, I'm from Afghanistan. I know what an invasion is. And the question that I like to ask... The question I was going to ask as a citizen and as a former refugee, I like to see sensible and workable policies and laws dealing with refugees and migrants. And after the recent riots, I think using the language of dehumanization and scapegoating and demonization hasn't worked. And I think you have a responsibility to actually encourage people to be tolerant. You know, I feel like we need to be more compassionate in dealing with the subject of refugees and asylum seekers.
Come back to Just firstly, it is illegal to leave a safe country, to cross a channel in a small boat, and to arrive at an unauthorized port. It is illegal. Sorry, that's the rules. The second point about responsibility. We all have to look at ourselves at the end of the day in the mirror and understand what we're doing and the choices we're making and whether our actions align with our values. My sense of responsibility is actually trying to fix the underlying crisis that is leaving a large majority of people in this country feeling deeply anxious about the security of their own country. I'm sorry if that upsets people, but I'm not going to stop doing it.
I just need to bring in Zoe. Do you agree with what Matt said about the legality of...
No, it's not. correct. It's always legal to enter a country that is signatory to the Refugee Convention for the purpose of claiming asylum. And refugees' journeys are recognized under the law as being not possible to always be made regularly.
Not while travelling through multiple safe countries.
It's totally irrelevant under the law. I'm sorry, it's just totally irrelevant.
Last question,
under
because
the
you
law.
ended. I'm going to end it with a question of my own. You mentioned at the start of the show, you mentioned just that, it's about people's anxieties, people's fears. And I think where we differ is I think you're helping to generate some of those fears and anxieties. And I really do wonder, listening to you tonight, how much the old Matt Goodwin would have liked the new Matt Goodwin, because just over a decade ago, you warned that, quote, Matt Goodwin warned, more and more voters are moving from the mainstream to the margins, guided by a toxic and, to be frank, nasty group of opinion makers in our society who appear to relish sowing the seeds of xenophobia, protest, and division. Was that you describing yourself a decade in the future?
What I assumed in 2010, 2011, and particularly as we went through the Brexit referendum, which was a really big moment for me, what I assumed is that many people in our politics would actually respond to what people in the country were saying, and they would compromise with those people, that they would give them what they promised. Lower migration, strong borders, a sense of control over the country. I would argue what we've seen over the last 15 years is an elite class that does not really care about everybody else in the country. And that makes me unpopular for pointing that out or saying, I don't think it's sustainable to have 140,000 illegally entering the country to join 1.2 million.
Not whether you're popular or not, Matt. It's about whether you're playing the role that you highlighted a decade ago. You said there were people who guided the public towards xenophobic positions. Today you're saying there's no role.
A lot of the things I'm doing, the writing and so on, I think I'm one of only a handful of people who's actually being honest with the British people.
Matt Goodwin, we will have to leave it there. Thank you for your time. Thank you.
Well, what did you guys think of that? Honestly, like, this left-wing bullshit of really just immigration and like defund the police and like letting little kids make decisions that affect their life for the rest of their basically affect the rest of their life, like life-altering decisions. It's kind of retarded, bro. Like, honestly, like, there's really no sensible, like, when a liberal person talks, they really don't speak any sense. Like, it's all like dream world type bullshit. Like, I wish, well, it is like this, and it's like kind of like the vibe. Like, I wish it would be like this. Like, I wish I could never argue with my spouse, and I wish my husband would do everything I tell him to do, and I wish that we were rich. It's like, no, what's realistic? Like, honestly, like, the right stands for realistic now. Like, right stands for reality, realism, realistic. Like, that's what the right stands for, common sense. The left is just like a bunch of fucking hope and like unrealistic and like that. Yeah, I don't even know the words to explain, but yeah. Let me know what you guys think down in the comment section. Hope you guys liked it. We're going to be posting this on YouTube and Rumble. So yeah, catch you guys later.